The first thing Sarah noticed about the mountain man wasn't his size, though he stood well over 6 feet and filled the doorway of her cabin like a bear blocking a cave entrance. It wasn't the snow crusted in his dark beard or the way his breath came out in ragged clouds in the freezing air. What caught her attention were his eyes, gray as the storm clouds that had been dumping snow on the Colorado Rockies for 3 days straight, and the way they widened when he saw her hands. She kept the shotgun level anyway. Living alone at 8,000 feet taught a woman to be cautious, even when a stranger looked half-frozen and desperate, especially then. "Please," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "I need help." Sarah had heard those words before, 5 years ago, from a man who'd seemed just as harmless. That encounter had left her with scars she kept hidden and a determination never to be fooled again. But this man was different. He swayed on his feet, and when he braced himself against the doorframe, she saw blood seeping through his heavy coat sleeve. "You're hurt," she said, stating the obvious while her mind raced through possibilities. "Bear attack? Hunting accident? Something worse?" "Fell," he managed, "trying to get down the mountain before the storm hit." Rock gave way. He looked past her into the warm glow of the cabin. "I saw your smoke. Been walking 2 hours. 2 hours in this weather would kill most people." Sarah lowered the shotgun slightly but didn't set it down. "You alone?" "Yes, ma'am." He tried to smile, but pain twisted it into a grimace. "Name's Jack Reeves. I've got a place about 10 miles north." Was checking on some equipment when the weather turned. She knew the name. The locals in Timber Creek, the tiny town 15 miles down the mountain, had mentioned Jack Reeves, a loner who'd bought old mining property and kept to himself. Some said he was running from something. Others claimed he was just another dreamer looking for gold that wasn't there anymore. Sarah understood the appeal of isolation better than most. "Come in," she finally said, stepping back. "But move slow and keep your hands where I can see them." Jack stumbled across the threshold, bringing the smell of pine and snow and copper-bright blood with him. Up close, Sarah could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 35, with the kind of weathered face that came from years outdoors. His hands, when he raised them in a gesture of surrender, were large and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard for everything he had. She directed him to the chair by the fireplace and finally set the shotgun aside, though she kept it within reach. Her own hands, small and precise, moved with practiced efficiency as she helped him out of his coat. The wound on his upper arm was deep but clean, the kind of gash that came from a sharp edge of rock rather than a jagged one. "You're lucky," she said, gathering her medical supplies. "Few inches to the right and you'd have bled out before you made it halfway here." "Luck's relative," Jack said through gritted teeth as she cleaned the wound. "Feels pretty unlucky from where I'm sitting." Sarah almost smiled. She appreciated a man who could crack jokes while hurt. It spoke to a certain kind of strength. As she worked, stitching the wound with the careful precision that came from years of veterinary training, she felt his eyes on her. Not on her face, but on her hands. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "I used to be a veterinarian." "Before I moved up here?" She didn't offer more, and he didn't ask. That was something else she appreciated. The storm howled outside, rattling the windows. Sarah had built this cabin herself, with her own 2 hands and sheer determination, after everything in her old life had fallen apart. It was solid, well-insulated, and stocked for exactly this kind of emergency. She'd planned for everything except a wounded stranger who looked at her hands like they were somehow remarkable. "You'll need to stay until the storm passes," she said, tying off the last stitch. "Could be another day or 2. Jack met her eyes for the first time, really met them, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Recognition, maybe. The kind that came from seeing someone who understood what it meant to hide from the world. "I don't want to impose," he said. "Too late for that. You're already here, and I'm not sending anyone back out into that storm." She stood, putting distance between them. "But we need ground rules. You stay on that side of the cabin, I stay on mine. We don't ask personal questions, and when the storm clears, you go." "Fair enough." Jack leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally showing on his face. "Thank you, Sarah." She froze. "I didn't tell you my name. It's on your mailbox." "Saw it when I came up the drive?" He closed his eyes. "Sarah Mitchell. The Hermit of Copper Ridge. People in town talk about you too. Of course they did. Small mountain towns had nothing better to do than gossip about the people who chose solitude over society. Sarah wondered what stories they told, what theories they'd spun about why a woman would choose to live alone on a mountain. Probably nothing close to the truth. She watched Jack drift toward sleep, his breathing evening out despite the pain he must be feeling. Outside, the storm raged on, burying the mountain under layers of white. Inside, the fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Sarah sat in her own chair across the room, the shotgun now leaning against the armrest, and realized she'd just broken her most important rule. She'd let someone in? Morning came gray and muted, the kind of light that made it impossible to tell if the storm had passed or simply paused to gather strength. Sarah woke to find Jack already up, standing by the window with his injured arm cradled against his chest. He'd taken off his flannel shirt and wore only a thermal undershirt that showed the breadth of his shoulders and the lean muscle of someone who earned his living with physical labor. "You should be resting," she said, her voice still rough with sleep. Jack turned, and she saw dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept about as well as she had. "Couldn't. Kept thinking about my dogs." "You have dogs?" Sarah sat up, instantly more alert. "3 of them. Huskies. They're in the cabin with plenty of food and water, but they'll be worried." He ran his good hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Storm like this, they know something's wrong." Sarah understood that kind of worry. She had her own dog, a border collie named Bones, who was currently watching Jack with one blue eye and one brown, trying to decide if this stranger was a threat or just another lost soul who'd wandered into their quiet life. "I've got coffee," she offered, moving to the small kitchen area. It was her way of making peace, of acknowledging that they were stuck together whether they liked it or not. They drank it in silence at first, both of them watching the snow fall in thick, heavy curtains outside. The world had shrunk to just this cabin, this room, these 2 people who'd been strangers 12 hours ago. "Can I ask you something?" Jack said finally. "Depends on the question. Your hands. When you were stitching me up last night, I noticed you favor your right hand heavily. Old injury?" Sarah's first instinct was to shut down the conversation, to remind him of the no personal questions rule. But something in his tone was genuinely curious, not prying. And if they were going to be trapped together, maybe small truths were safer than the large lies that silence could breed. "Something like that," she said. "My left hand works fine for most things, but fine motor control is tricky sometimes." "Nerve damage." Jack nodded, accepting this without pushing for details. "My father had something similar. Logging accident when I was a kid, crushed 3 fingers. The doctors saved them, but they never worked quite right again. Is he still logging?" "No." Jack's face went carefully neutral. "He passed away 6 years ago. Heart attack. I'm sorry." "Don't be." "We weren't close." He took another sip of coffee. "He wasn't a good man, especially after he lost the use of those fingers. Took it out on everyone around him." Sarah heard what he wasn't saying, the implications hidden in the careful flatness of his voice. She'd learned to recognize the markers of pain people tried to hide. It was one of the reasons she'd left her old life behind. "So you came to the mountains to get away," she said. "Isn't that why we're all here?" Jack met her eyes over the rim of his mug. "Running from something or toward something. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." Before Sarah could respond, Bones suddenly jumped to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Both of them froze. The dog's attention was fixed on the door, his hackles raised. "Is he always like this?" Jack whispered. "Never." Sarah set down her coffee and reached for the shotgun. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Bones, quiet." The dog fell silent but didn't relax. Then Sarah heard it too, the sound of an engine struggling through the deep snow. Someone was coming up the mountain, toward her cabin, in the middle of a storm that should have made the road impassable. Jack was on his feet despite his injury, moving to the window. "You expecting anyone?" "No one even knows exactly where I live except the postmaster." Sarah's mind raced. "The road shouldn't be passable. It's a truck. Big one, with chains." Jack's voice had gone tight. "And it just stopped about 50 yards out." Sarah moved to join him at the window, keeping the shotgun ready. Through the falling snow, she could make out the dark shape of a heavy-duty pickup, the kind with a winch on the front and all-terrain tires. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to get up here. "Friend of yours?" Jack asked. "I don't have friends who make house calls." Sarah's mouth went dry as two figures emerged from the truck. Even at a distance, even through the snow, she recognized the way one of them moved. That swagger, that presumptuous confidence that had once charmed her and later terrified her. "Sarah?" Jack was watching her face now, concern replacing caution. "What's wrong?" "That's my ex-husband," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "And he's not supposed to know where I live." The two figures started trudging through the snow toward the cabin. David Mitchell, still handsome in that smooth, calculated way, wearing expensive outdoor gear that had probably never seen real wilderness before yesterday. The man with him was bigger, rougher looking, and Sarah didn't recognize him at all. "Restraining order?" Jack asked quietly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Her hands had started to shake, the left one more than the right, and she hated herself for it. 5 years of therapy, of rebuilding, of learning to be strong again, and her body still betrayed her at the sight of him. Then she felt Jack's hand, warm and steady, close over both of hers on the shotgun. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and calm. "You're not alone this time. And I'm not about to let anyone hurt you, understand?" Sarah looked up at him, at this stranger who'd stumbled into her life during a storm, and saw absolute certainty in his gray eyes. It should have felt wrong, trusting someone she'd just met. But sometimes survival meant accepting help from unexpected places. "Okay," she whispered. "Good." Jack stepped back, picking up his discarded flannel shirt and shrugging it on despite the pain it caused. "Now, how do you want to play this?" Outside, David and his companion had reached the porch steps. Sarah could hear David's voice now, that familiar tone that could shift from honey to venom in a heartbeat, calling her name like he had every right to be here. She took a deep breath, feeling something harden inside her chest. 5 years ago, she'd run from this man. She'd changed her name, sold everything she owned, and disappeared into the mountains because she'd been too afraid to stand and fight. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She'd built this cabin with her own damaged hands. She'd survived winters that would have broken the person she used to be. And she'd be damned if she'd let David Mitchell make her run again. "We make it clear he's not welcome," Sarah said, chambering a round into the shotgun. "And if he doesn't leave, we call the sheriff." Jack nodded. "I'll back whatever play you make." Sarah walked to the door, bones pressed against her leg, and Jack moved to stand slightly behind her and to the right, visible but not threatening, a show of solidarity. She appreciated that more than she could say. When she opened the door, David's practiced smile faltered for just a moment at the sight of the shotgun. Then he recovered, spreading his hands in a gesture of false innocence. "Sarah, darling, there you are. I've been so worried. You shouldn't be here, David." Her voice didn't shake, small victory. "There's a restraining order. In California, yes. But we're in Colorado now." He took a step closer, and Sarah saw his eyes flick to Jack. "Who's your friend?" "Someone who knows how to follow the law," Jack said evenly. "Restraining orders are reciprocal across state lines." "You know that?" David's smile tightened. "And you are?" "Someone who's going to make sure you leave." The larger man with David shifted his weight, hand moving toward his jacket, and Sarah's finger moved to the trigger guard. "Don't. Easy, everyone." David held up his hands again. "I just want to talk to my wife." "Ex-wife," Sarah corrected. "The divorce was final 4 years ago. About that," David's tone shifted, became almost pleading. "I made mistakes, Sarah, I know that. But I've changed. I've been in therapy. I just want a chance to apologize properly, face to face. It was a good performance." Sarah could almost believe he meant it, the way she'd believed so many promises before. But she'd learned to see past the words to the calculation behind them, the way David's eyes assessed and measured, looking for weaknesses to exploit. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property," she said, "or I'm calling the sheriff." "With what?" "There's no cell service up here, and I know you don't have a landline." David took another step forward, and now Sarah could see the anger starting to crack through his facade. "You can't hide from me forever, Sarah. I have rights. You have the right to leave before I press charges for violating a protection order." Jack moved slightly. Positioning himself between Sarah and David, "The lady asked you to go? Don't make this harder than it needs to be." For a long moment, no one moved. The snow fell around them, silent and implacable. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the old fear trying to claw its way up her throat, but she also felt the solid presence of Jack beside her and Bones pressed against her legs and the weight of the shotgun in her hands. She wasn't helpless, she wasn't alone, and she wasn't going to run. David must have seen something in her face, some change he didn't like, because his expression hardened. "This isn't over. Yeah, it is." Jack's voice carried a note of finality. "And if you're smart, you'll remember that threatening someone in front of a witness is a crime." David stared at Jack for a long moment, then at Sarah. Whatever he saw made him take a step back. "Come on, Ray, we're wasting our time here." The two men trudged back through the snow toward their truck. Sarah didn't lower the shotgun until they'd driven away, the sound of the engine fading into the storm. Even then, she stood in the doorway, watching the space where the truck had been, unable to quite believe it was over. "Sarah," Jack's voice was gentle, "come back inside." "You're shaking." The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her cold and unsteady. Jack guided her back into the cabin, took the shotgun from her hands, and sat her down by the fire. Bones immediately jumped into her lap, a warm, solid weight that helped ground her. "How did he find you?" Jack asked, crouching in front of her. "I don't know." Sarah buried her fingers in Bones's fur. "I was so careful. New name, new life. The only mail I get comes to a P.O. box in Timber Creek," someone told him. Or sold him the information. Jack's jaw tightened. People can be bought, especially in small towns where everyone knows everyone else's business. Sarah knew he was right. It was the risk of living in a place like this. Privacy and isolation came with the price of being memorable, of sticking out. The hermit woman on Copper Ridge, of course people talked about her. "He'll come back," she said quietly. "David doesn't give up. He's obsessive when he wants something." "Then we'll be ready." Jack stood, moving to the window. "And next time, we'll have the sheriff here waiting for him. If we can get the sheriff up here in this weather. Storm can't last forever, but..." Jack's expression suggested he was thinking the same thing Sarah was. What if David came back before the storm cleared? What if next time he didn't announce himself with an engine roar and a polite knock? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of fear settling over her shoulders like an old, heavy coat. She'd worked so hard to get rid of that fear, to build a life where she felt safe. And in less than an hour, David had shattered that safety just by showing up. "Talk to me," Jack said, returning to sit across from her. "Tell me what I need to know to help keep you safe." So she did. It wasn't easy, putting 5 years of terror into words, but Sarah found herself telling Jack about the marriage that had slowly turned from dream to nightmare. The way David's charm had masked his need for control. The first time he grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. The escalation that had culminated in the night he'd broken 3 fingers on her left hand because she dared to suggest leaving. Jack listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for trusting me with that," he finally said. "And I promise you, Sarah, he's not going to hurt you again." It was a promise Jack had no real way of keeping. But hearing it still helped. The storm settled in like it meant to stay forever, and Sarah found herself in the strange situation of being trapped in close quarters with a man she barely knew but was beginning to trust. Jack proved to be surprisingly easy company. He didn't hover or treat her like she was fragile. He helped with the small chores that kept the cabin running, splitting kindling one-handed and keeping the fire fed despite his injured arm. On the second day, Sarah found him examining the radio in the corner, the old CB unit she kept for emergencies. "This work?" he asked. "Should. I tested it last month." She moved to join him. "Why?" "Been thinking about your ex. If he's up here in this storm, he's either staying at the motel in Timber Creek or he's rented a place nearby." Jack fiddled with the dials. "Either way, we should let someone know he's been harassing you." Sarah watched him work the radio, his large hands surprisingly deft with the small controls. After a few minutes of static, a voice crackled through. "This is Timber Creek Sheriff's Office, Deputy Carson speaking." Relief flooded through Sarah. She took the microphone from Jack. "Deputy, This is Sarah Mitchell up on Copper Ridge. I need to report a restraining order violation. There was a pause. Sarah, that you? We've been trying to reach you. Your ex-husband filed a missing persons report 2 days ago. Said he had reason to believe you were in danger up there. Sarah's blood ran cold. Of course David had thought of that. It was exactly the kind of move he would make, establishing himself as the concerned ex-husband while simultaneously giving himself an excuse to come looking for her. I'm fine, she said. But he showed up at my cabin yesterday with another man, violating the protection order. I need that documented. Copy that. Unfortunately, with this storm, we can't get anyone up there for at least another day or two. Roads are completely impassable below 5,000 feet. Deputy Carson's voice crackled with static. You got someone there with you? Not safe to be alone if he's still in the area. Sarah glanced at Jack, who nodded. Yes, I'm not alone. Good. Keep your doors locked and your phone charged. Wait, you don't have cell service up there, do you? No, just the CB. All right. Keep this channel open when you can. Check in every 12 hours. And Sarah? If he comes back, you call immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. After signing off, Sarah sat back, feeling drained. He planned this, the storm, the timing, all of it. David probably watched the weather reports and knew I'd be cut off. Sounds like you married a real piece of work, Jack said. I was young and stupid. 23 and fresh out of vet school. He was a successful lawyer, charming, sophisticated. Everything I thought I wanted. Sarah pulled her knees to her chest. By the time I realized what he really was, I was too isolated from friends and family to ask for help. He'd made sure of that. Jack was quiet for a moment. My mother stayed with my father for 20 years. Everyone kept asking why she didn't leave, like it was that simple. Like fear and manipulation and financial control weren't real chains. What finally made her leave? She didn't. She died when I was 17. Fell down the stairs, the official report said. Jack's voice was flat. But I was there. I heard them fighting. I heard the sound she made when he pushed her. Sarah's heart clenched. Jack, I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm telling you so you understand that I get it. I know what men like your ex are capable of. And I know that the system doesn't always protect the people who need it most. He met her eyes. That's why I'm not leaving you alone until this is resolved. Storm or no storm, injury or no injury. I'm staying. Something warm unfurled in Sarah's chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. But I owe it to the 17-year-old kid I was, who wasn't strong enough to protect his mother. I can't change the past, but I can make sure history doesn't repeat itself here. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jack showed Sarah some basic self-defense moves that would work even with her damaged hand. In return, she checked his stitches and changed his bandage, pleased to see the wound was healing cleanly. They took turns monitoring the CB radio and keeping watch at the windows. Bones seemed to sense the tension and rarely left Sarah's side. As night fell, Jack built up the fire while Sarah made dinner. It was strange, this domestic partnership with someone who'd been a stranger just days ago. But crisis had a way of accelerating relationships, of stripping away the usual pretenses and revealing who people really were. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they ate. Fair's fair. I asked you about your hands. Why were you really out in that storm? 10 miles from your cabin, checking equipment? That doesn't make sense. Jack set down his fork, and for a moment Sarah thought he might deflect. But then he sighed. I was running a trap line. Not for animals? He added quickly. Motion sensor cameras? I've had someone breaking into my storage sheds, stealing equipment. Thought if I could get footage, I could figure out who. Did you? Yeah, actually. Checked the cameras right before the storm hit. His expression darkened. It was that guy with your ex. Ray, you called him? Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. What? Are you sure? Same build, same face. He's been hitting my property for weeks. Jack leaned forward. Which means this isn't coincidence. Your ex has been planning this for a while. Long enough to send someone to scout the area, figure out who lives nearby, what resources they have. The implications made Sarah's skin crawl. David had been watching, planning, waiting for the perfect opportunity, and he'd found it in this storm. We should tell Deputy Carson, she said. First thing tomorrow. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Jack hesitated. I recognized your ex. What do you mean? David Mitchell, corporate attorney, right? Specializes in real estate development? That was his field, yes. Why? Because 6 months ago, a man named David Mitchell approached me about selling my property. Said he represented a development company interested in the mineral rights. I turned him down. Jack's jaw tightened. At the time, I thought it was just business. But now I'm wondering if he somehow found out you were living up here, traced you through the property records, and used that land offer as an excuse to scope out the area. Sarah felt sick. He's been hunting me for 6 months? Maybe longer. These kinds of guys, they don't let go. In his mind, you're still his property, and he's just taking back what belongs to him. The fear Sarah had been holding at bay suddenly threatened to overwhelm her. She stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something. Jack caught her hand as she passed. Hey, look at me. When she did, his gray eyes were steady and sure. He doesn't get to win, we're smarter than him, and we're ready? He doesn't know we figured out his game. What if being ready isn't enough? Then we improvise. Jack squeezed her hand gently. But I'm not going to let him take you. That's a promise. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused, her small and scarred. There was something reassuring about the contrast, about the way his strength didn't diminish hers but complemented it. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Really? Honestly? Because when I stumbled into your cabin and you pointed that shotgun at me, I saw something in your eyes. Strength and fear fighting each other. It reminded me of my mother, but also of every time I've looked in the mirror. Jack stood, still holding her hand. We're the same, you and me. Survivors trying to build something new out of the wreckage of our pasts. And survivors stick together. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally being seen and understood by someone who got it. She stepped closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. Jack? I know. His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away a tear. I feel it too. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and danger. Sarah knew getting involved with someone now, while her life was under threat, was probably the worst idea she could have. But she'd spent 5 years being careful, being safe, being alone. And Jack's presence made her feel something she'd thought David had destroyed forever. She felt brave. Sarah rose on her toes and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Jack went very still, then kissed her back with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. That's probably a terrible idea, Sarah whispered. Probably the worst. Jack's smile was crooked. But I'm not sorry. Me neither. They stood there, foreheads touching until bones barked sharply. Both of them sprang apart, instantly alert. The dog was at the window, growling low in his throat. Jack moved to look out. Can't see anything. Too dark, but Sarah's instincts were screaming. She grabbed the shotgun and killed the lights inside the cabin. In the sudden darkness, they could see better through the windows. At first, there was nothing but snow and shadows. Then Sarah saw it, a flicker of light in the trees, maybe 200 yards out, not a natural light. A flashlight or lantern, moving slowly toward the cabin. He's here, she breathed. Jack was already moving, checking locks, closing curtains. Get on the radio. Tell Carson we need help now. Sarah fumbled for the CB in the dark, her hands shaking. But when she tried to call, there was nothing but static. She tried different channels, adjusting the frequency, but the result was the same. Jack, the radio's not working. He came over, tried it himself, then cursed softly. The antenna. Someone's cut the line. They were alone. Cut off from help, with David somewhere outside in the dark, and a storm that showed no signs of ending. Sarah felt the old panic rising, the helplessness she'd fought so hard to overcome. Then Jack's hand found hers in the darkness. We've got this, he said. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. You're stronger now. Prove it. Sarah took a shaky breath, then another. He was right. She'd survived worse than this. She'd rebuilt herself from nothing. And this time she wasn't facing her demons alone. Okay, she said. Let's show him what happens when you corner a survivor. They worked quickly in the dark, moving with the kind of efficiency that came from shared purpose. Jack secured the doors and windows while Sarah gathered supplies. The shotgun, her hunting rifle, extra ammunition, flashlights, the first aid kit. Bones stayed close to Sarah, his ears pricked and alert. "How many ways into this cabin?" Jack asked. "2 doors, 6 windows. But I reinforced everything when I built it. Solid deadbolts, security film on the glass." Sarah checked the rifle's magazine. "He's not getting in easy." "Good, we use that. Make him work for every inch." Jack positioned himself where he could watch both the front and back approaches. "You said he's obsessive. What does that mean in practical terms?" Sarah thought about it. "He's patient, methodical, he won't rush. He'll try to scare me first, wear me down psychologically before he makes a real move." As if to confirm her words, a voice called out from the darkness. "Sarah? I know you can hear me. I just want to talk. Is that so wrong? After everything we meant to each other?" David's voice carried easily through the still night air. Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle, but she didn't respond. "Playing hard to get? That's fine, I can wait. I've waited 5 years. What's one more night?" A pause. "But your friend can't stay in there forever. Eventually he'll need to leave. And then it'll just be you and me like old times." Jack touched Sarah's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. She appreciated that he didn't try to reassure her with empty words. They both knew David was right. Time was on his side. "We need to change the equation," Sarah whispered. "Do something he doesn't expect. I'm listening." An idea was forming, risky but possible. "What if we don't wait for him to come to us? What if we go to him?" Jack looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "That's what he wants." "No, he wants me scared and trapped. He wants to be the hunter." "But what if the prey becomes the predator?" Sarah moved to the window, studying the terrain. "I know every inch of this mountain." "David doesn't. In the dark, in the snow, that's an advantage. It's also a great way to get killed. So sitting here waiting for him to burn us out or pick us off when we're forced to leave." Sarah met Jack's eyes. "I'm not suggesting we go charging out there. But if we can flank him, get behind him, we control the situation." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "You're serious about this? 5 years ago, I ran from this man. I'm done running." Sarah's voice was hard. "This is my mountain, my home. He doesn't get to take it from me." "All right." Jack checked his own weapon, a pistol he'd been carrying. "But we do this smart. We stick together, we move slow, and at the first sign this is going sideways, we fall back." "Agreed?" "Agreed." They geared up in silence, layering on warm clothes and waterproof outerwear. Sarah strapped on snowshoes and handed a pair to Jack. She also packed a small backpack with emergency supplies, because years of living in the mountains had taught her to always prepare for the worst. "What about Bones?" Jack asked. Sarah looked at her dog, who was watching them with intelligent eyes. "Bones, stay, guard." The collie whined but moved to his bed near the fireplace. He'd obey, but he wouldn't like it. They left through the back door, moving low and quiet. The snow had finally stopped falling, but the clouds still blocked the moon and stars. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint glow from the cabin windows behind them. Sarah led the way, moving with the confidence of someone who'd walked this ground 1,000 times. She took them up and around, using the terrain to mask their movement. Jack followed close behind, surprisingly quiet for a man his size. It took 20 minutes to circle wide enough to come up on David's probable position from behind. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, adrenaline sharpening her senses. She could hear Jack's breathing, smell the pine sap on the cold air, feel the grip of her rifle in her hands. Then she saw them, 2 figures crouched behind a fallen log about 50 yards from her cabin. David and Ray, positioned where they could watch both doors. They had a camp stove going, a small blue flame that gave off just enough light to see by. Confident, comfortable, they were settling in for a siege. Sarah gestured to Jack, pointing out their position. He nodded, understanding. They crept closer, using the trees for cover, until they were maybe 30 feet behind David's position. That's when Sarah stepped on a branch hidden beneath the snow. The crack echoed like a gunshot in the still air. Both men spun around, Ray fumbling for a weapon. Sarah didn't give him time to find it. Federal offense to stalk someone across state lines, she called out, her rifle trained on David. And that's before we get to breaking and entering, destruction of property, and violating a restraining order. David slowly stood, hands raised, but his face showed no fear. If anything, he looked pleased. Sarah, I should have known you wouldn't just sit there waiting. You always were stubborn, and you were always arrogant enough to underestimate me. Sarah kept the rifle steady. It's over, David. The sheriff knows you're here. Deputy Carson is waiting for the roads to clear so he can come arrest you. Is he now? David's smile widened. That's interesting, since I had a very pleasant conversation with Deputy Carson this afternoon. Told him all about my unstable ex-wife who's been living alone in the wilderness, clearly suffering from paranoid delusions. He was very understanding. Sarah's stomach dropped. Of course, David had gotten to Carson. He was a layer. Manipulation was his specialty. Doesn't matter what you told him, Jack said, moving slightly to get a better angle on Ray. We've got witnesses. I've got documentation of Ray here stealing from my property. We've got evidence. Evidence that mysteriously disappeared when my associate paid your cabin a visit this afternoon. David's confidence was absolute. By now, those cameras and their footage are at the bottom of a very deep ravine. As for witnesses, well, who's going to believe a hermit and a drifter over a respected attorney? Sarah's mind raced. He'd thought of everything, covered every angle. That was David's gift, planning for contingencies, eliminating variables. He'd spent months setting this up, making sure that when he finally made his move, there would be no escape. So what's your endgame here, David? She asked, buying time to think. You take me back to California by force? You think that works? I think you're going to come willingly. David took a step forward. Because if you don't, accidents happen. Like the one that's going to happen to your friend here if you keep being difficult. Ray had finally found his gun, a large revolver that he pointed at Jack. The message was clear: cooperate or watch someone else die because of you. Sarah felt the old fear trying to claw its way back, the paralyzing terror that had controlled her for so many years. David knew her weaknesses, knew exactly how to manipulate her guilt and compassion. He'd always known. But he'd miscalculated one thing. He'd underestimated how much 5 years of freedom had changed her. And he'd definitely underestimated Jack. Here's what's going to happen instead, Jack said, his voice calm and steady. You're going to put down your weapons and walk away. Because in about 30 seconds, this whole area is going to be lit up like a Christmas tree. David laughed. Bluffing doesn't suit you. Not a bluff. Jack pulled out a small remote from his pocket. See, when I checked my trapline cameras before the storm, I did more than just download footage. I activated the emergency beacon system. It's something I installed after someone started stealing from me. Motion-activated floodlights, all solar-powered, all positioned around my property line. Which, if you'd bothered to check the county records properly, extends to about 20 feet from where you're standing. He pressed the button. The world exploded into brilliant white light. Dozens of high-powered LEDs activated simultaneously, turning the forest into noon. Ray cursed and threw up his hand to shield his eyes. David stumbled backward, temporarily blinded. Run, Jack shouted. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. They crashed through the undergrowth, putting distance between themselves and David's position. Behind them she could hear shouting, the sound of pursuit. But the lights had given them precious seconds, and Sarah used them. She led Jack on a winding path through terrain she knew by heart, across a frozen stream and up a rocky slope that would be treacherous for anyone unfamiliar with it. Her snowshoes gave her traction. David and Ray, in their expensive boots, would struggle. They'd gone maybe half a mile when Sarah heard the sound that made her blood run cold. A gunshot, then another. The bullets whined through the trees, nowhere close but close enough to be a threat. They're shooting blind, Jack said, breathing hard. They can't see us. But they know the general direction. Sarah pulled him behind a boulder. We need to get to higher ground. There's a ranger station about 2 miles north. It'll be locked, but we can break in, use their radio. 2 miles in this terrain, at night, with them following? Jack shook his head. Sarah, I can't move that fast with this arm. Then I'll help you. You'll get yourself killed trying to drag me up a mountain. Sarah grabbed his coat, pulling him close. I didn't survive 5 years alone just to give up now. And I'm not leaving you behind, so we move together or we make a stand here. Your choice. Jack stared at her for a long moment, then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of the same stubborn will that had kept him alive through his own dark years. Together, he said. Always together. They moved as fast as Jack's injury would allow, climbing steadily. Sarah's legs burned with the effort, her lungs aching in the cold air. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter but never disappeared entirely. David was relentless. It took an hour to reach the ranger station, a small cabin perched on an outcropping that overlooked the valley. Sarah kicked in the door, not bothering with subtlety. Inside was basic but functional, a wood stove, emergency supplies, and most importantly, a radio that ran off a generator. While Jack got the generator started, Sarah barricaded the door and checked their ammunition. They were running low. If David caught up to them here, they'd have to make every shot count. The radio crackled to life. Sarah grabbed the microphone, switching through channels until she found the emergency frequency. This is Sarah Mitchell calling any available unit. We have a domestic violence situation in progress, shots fired, need immediate assistance at the North Ranger Station on Copper Ridge. Repeat, this is an emergency. Static. Then a voice, not Deputy Carson's. Copy that, Ms. Mitchell. This is Sheriff Torres. We've been trying to reach you. Where's Deputy Carson? I don't know. My ex-husband claimed he'd talked to him, convinced him I was unstable. Carson's been suspended pending investigation. We got a tip this morning that he's been taking bribes. I've got state police on the way to your location, but the roads are still bad. ETA is 90 minutes. Can you hold out that long? Sarah looked at Jack, who nodded grimly. We'll hold. Good. Stay on this frequency. I'll talk you through. For the next hour, they waited. Jack kept watch while Sarah maintained contact with Sheriff Torres, who kept them updated on the response team's progress. The sheriff also ran David's name through the system and came back with information that made Sarah's blood boil. David had a history. 2 other women before Sarah, both with restraining orders, both of whom had mysteriously dropped their complaints. One had moved to another country. The other had simply disappeared. He's done this before, Sarah said, feeling sick. And he got away with it. Not this time, Jack's jaw was set. This time, he picked the wrong woman. That's when they heard the sound of breaking glass from below. David had found them. They're coming in the back window, Jack said, moving to cover that approach. Sarah, get ready, Sheriff Torres's voice came through the radio. State police are 15 minutes out. Do not engage if you can avoid it. But avoiding wasn't an option anymore. Sarah could hear footsteps on the wooden floor below, David's voice calling out to her with that horrible false sweetness. Sarah, darling, why are we doing this? All this running, all this drama? Just come with me and this all ends. He's trying to lure you out, Jack whispered. Don't respond, but Sarah had an idea. David, you're right. I'm tired of running. Jack looked at her like she'd lost her mind, but Sarah held up a hand. I'll come with you, but Jack stays here. He's not part of this. Sarah, what are you... Jack started, but she cut him off with a look. Do we have a deal, David? There was a pause. Come down, slowly, no weapons. Sarah set down her rifle and started for the stairs. Jack grabbed her arm. This is suicide, he hissed. No, Sarah whispered back. This is bait. When I get down there, you come down behind them. We trap them between us. That's insane. You have a better idea with 13 minutes until help arrives? Jack's expression said he didn't. I swear to God, Sarah, if you get yourself killed. You'll what? You barely know me. I know enough. His hand tightened on her arm. I know you're the bravest person I've ever met. I know I haven't felt this way about anyone in years. And I know that if something happens to you, I'll never forgive myself. Sarah's heart clenched. Then don't let anything happen to me. Be my backup. That's all I'm asking. She kissed him quickly, fiercely, then pulled away before she could lose her nerve. The descent down those stairs was the longest walk of Sarah's life. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything but walk toward the man who'd haunted her nightmares for 5 years. But she'd meant what she said to Jack. She was done running. David waited at the bottom, Ray behind him with his gun drawn. In the dim light, Sarah could see the triumph on David's face. He thought he'd won. "There's my girl," he said, reaching for her. "I knew you'd see reason." Sarah let him take her hand, fighting down revulsion at his touch. "I want your word that Jack walks away from this." "Of course." "This was never about him." David pulled her closer. "It was always about us. About you remembering where you belong. I remember." Sarah met his eyes. "I remember every bruise, every threat, every time you made me feel small and powerless. I remember all of it, David." His expression darkened. "Sarah, but you know what I remember most. I remember the woman I was before I met you, strong, capable, free, and I've spent 5 years becoming her again." Sarah's voice was steel. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let me go, and you're going to turn yourself into the police who are about 12 minutes away. Or we're going to do this the hard way." David's grip on her hand tightened painfully. "You think you can threaten me? You think I won't—" Whatever he was about to say was cut off by Jack's voice from the stairs. "Step away from her, now." Ray spun, but Jack already had his pistol trained on him. For a frozen moment, no one moved. Then David made his mistake. He jerked Sarah in front of him like a shield, his arm around her throat. "Drop the gun," David snarled, "or I'll break her neck." Sarah felt the pressure on her windpipe, the familiar terror of being trapped in David's grip. But this time was different. This time she was ready. She drove her elbow back into David's ribs with all her strength, the way Jack had taught her. The impact broke his hold just enough for her to drop her weight and twist free. David stumbled, reaching for her, and that's when Jack moved. He came down the last 3 stairs in a rush, hitting Ray with enough force to send the bigger man sprawling. The revolver clattered across the floor. Sarah dove for it, her damaged hand making her clumsy, but she got there first. When she turned, she had Ray's gun pointed at David, who'd frozen halfway to his feet. "Don't," she said simply. David looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than confidence in his eyes. He saw fear. He'd finally realized she wasn't the same broken woman he'd terrorized years ago. "Sarah," he said, his voice taking on that pleading tone he'd used so effectively before. "Please." "I'm sorry, I just wanted you back." "I love you." "No," Sarah said, and her voice was steady and sure. "You don't love me. You love controlling me. And that ends now." The sound of sirens cut through the night air. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows as the state police finally arrived. Sheriff Torres came through the door first, weapon drawn, taking in the scene. "Everyone stay where you are," he commanded. Sarah carefully set down the revolver and stepped back, her hands raised. "Sheriff Torres, thank you for coming." The next hour passed in a blur of statements and evidence collection. David and Ray were arrested, read their rights, and taken away in separate vehicles. Sarah watched David's face as he was loaded into the police car, and this time she felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no regret. Just relief that it was finally over. The sun rose on a world transformed. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white that sparkled in the early morning light. Sarah stood on the porch of the ranger station, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the emergency vehicles make their careful way back down the mountain. Jack came to stand beside her, his injured arm in a proper sling now courtesy of the paramedics. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure yet," Sarah admitted. "Ask me again in a few days when this all feels real." They'd given their statements multiple times to different officers until the whole story was documented. Sheriff Torres had been particularly interested in the evidence of David's stalking behavior, the months of planning and surveillance. Combined with the information from his previous victims, the DA was confident they had a case that would put David away for years. "The sheriff said you'll need to testify," Jack said. "I know." Sarah took a deep breath of cold, clean air. "And I will. Every word of it. No more hiding." "You never were hiding," Jack said quietly. "You were surviving?" "There's a difference." Sarah turned to look at him, this mountain man who'd stumbled into her life during a storm and stayed to help her fight her demons. His face was stubbled and tired, his hair a mess, and there was still pain in his eyes when he moved wrong. But he'd never looked better to her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Well, I need to get back to my place, check on my dogs. Make sure Ray didn't do any more damage. Jack shifted his weight. And you probably need some time to process all this. Sarah nodded. It was the sensible thing, the smart thing. They'd been through a trauma together, formed a bond under pressure. People always warned about getting involved with someone during a crisis, about mistaking adrenaline for genuine connection. But Sarah had learned to trust her instincts again. And her instincts were telling her that what she felt for Jack was real. Or, she said slowly, you could stay at my place while you recover. It's closer, and I could help with your dogs. Bring them over, even. I've got the space. Jack's expression shifted, hope and uncertainty warring in his eyes. Sarah, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. She took his hand, the gesture feeling natural now. These last few days, having you there, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. I chose isolation because I needed to heal. But I think maybe I'm ready for something more now. Are you sure? Because I'm not going anywhere. I've got a place 10 miles away. We can take this slow, see where it goes without rushing. Jack, you literally saved my life. I think we're past slow, he laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Fair point. But still, I don't want you to feel pressured. You just got free of one controlling relationship. The last thing you need is, Sarah kissed him, cutting off his worried rambling. When she pulled back, she saw his surprised smile. Does that feel like I'm being pressured? She asked. No, ma'am, it does not. Good, then let's go home. They made the journey back to Sarah's cabin together, taking their time on the snow-covered trail. The state police had left one officer behind to secure David's campsite as evidence, and they waved as Sarah and Jack passed. Everything felt different in the daylight, less threatening, more manageable. When they reached the cabin, Bones nearly knocked Sarah over in his enthusiasm. She buried her face in his fur, letting the simple joy of her dog's affection wash over her. She was safe. She was home. And she wasn't alone. Over the next few days, a new routine established itself. Jack brought his 3 huskies over, and while there was initial chaos as the dogs figured out their hierarchy, they eventually settled into something resembling peace. The cabin that had felt so empty and quiet for years was suddenly full of life and noise and warmth. Jack proved to be handy in ways Sarah appreciated. He fixed the broken antenna on her radio and reinforced the security on her doors and windows, though both of them knew David wouldn't be a threat anymore. He also cooked, which was a revelation since Sarah had subsisted mostly on simple meals designed for efficiency rather than pleasure. In return, Sarah tended his injury and helped him process the damage Ray had done to his property. The theft had been extensive, thousands of dollars in equipment, but Jack took it philosophically. Things can be replaced, he said. And honestly, it brought me to your cabin. Hard to regret that. 2 weeks after the arrest, Deputy Carson was formally charged with bribery and obstruction of justice. David's lawyers tried to use Carson's corruption to discredit the case, but there were too many witnesses, too much evidence. The trial was set for spring. Sarah knew she'd have to face David again in court. The thought still made her nervous, but it didn't terrify her the way it once would have. She'd looked him in the eye and refused to be his victim anymore. She could do it again. One evening, as snow fell gently outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Sarah found herself on the couch with Jack, their dogs sprawled around them in various states of sleep. Jack had his good arm around her shoulders, and she was tucked against his side in a way that felt absolutely right. "Can I ask you something?" Jack said, always. "That first night, when I showed up at your door, you could have turned me away. Could have let me freeze rather than risk letting a stranger in. Why didn't you?" Sarah thought about it. "I saw something in your eyes. Pain, maybe, or loneliness. Something that matched what I was feeling." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Why did you stay? After David showed up, you could have left. Should have left. It wasn't your fight. Because I'd spent 6 years running from my past, and I was tired of it. Tired of being alone. Tired of hiding." Jack's hand tightened on her shoulder. "And because I looked at you standing there with that shotgun, facing down the man who'd hurt you, and I thought, this is someone worth fighting for." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I was so scared." "I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the snow fall. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the terrified woman fleeing California to the person she was now, strong, capable, loved. "I'm glad you fell on that mountain," she said finally. Jack laughed. "That might be the strangest thing anyone's ever said to me." "I mean it. If you hadn't been hurt, if you hadn't needed help, we never would have met. I'd still be alone up here, and you'd still be alone at your place, and we'd both be missing something we didn't even know we needed. Fate? Maybe, or just really good luck," Sarah smiled. "Either way, I'll take it." Jack shifted so he could cup her face in his hand. "Sarah Mitchell, I know this has all happened fast. I know we've got a lot to figure out, but I need you to know something." "What's that?" "I'm not going anywhere. Storm or shine, good days or bad, I'm here. For as long as you'll have me." Sarah's heart swelled with an emotion she'd thought David had destroyed forever. Love, real love. The kind built on respect and trust and genuine partnership. The kind that made you braver instead of smaller. "Can you handle my hands, Mountain Man?" she asked, echoing the question that had become something of a private joke between them. "When I pull you close and won't let go?" Jack's smile was slow and sure. "Baby, I was made for your hands. Every scar, every imperfection, every bit of strength they represent, I can handle all of you. The question is, can you handle me?" Sarah pulled him down for a kiss that answered better than words ever could. Yes. Yes, to the mountain man who'd stumbled into her life. Yes, to the future they'd build together. Yes, to being brave enough to love again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the mountain in white. Inside, two survivors who'd found each other against all odds held each other close and began to dream of spring. The story could have ended there, but life has a way of continuing past the dramatic moments into something quieter and more sustaining. Over the following months, Sarah and Jack built something real. They combined their properties, creating a small sanctuary where they ran a boarding facility for working dogs. Sarah's veterinary skills and Jack's experience training animals made them a perfect team. When spring came and the trial started, Sarah stood in that courtroom with her head high and told her story. Every painful detail, every moment of fear, every bit of courage it had taken to escape. Jack sat in the front row every single day, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. David was sentenced to 15 years. As they led him away, he looked at Sarah one last time, and she saw nothing there but a small, pathetic man who tried to destroy her and failed. She felt pity more than anything else. On a bright morning in May, Sarah and Jack stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The world was green and alive, full of possibility. "You know what I was thinking?" Jack said. "What's that?" "We should expand, build another cabin for guests. Maybe offer guided hiking tours, survival skills classes. Really make use of this place." Sarah smiled. A year ago, the thought of inviting strangers onto her mountain would have terrified her. Now it just sounded like an adventure. "I think that's a great idea." "Yeah?" "Yeah, but on one condition. Name it." Sarah took his hand, the gesture as natural as breathing now. "We do it together." "Always together." Jack pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I wouldn't have it any other way." And as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah realized something she'd never quite believed before. Happy endings weren't just for stories. Sometimes, if you were brave enough and strong enough and lucky enough to find the right person to stand beside you, they happened in real life too. She'd spent 5 years running from her past. Now she was ready to run toward her future, hand in hand with a mountain man who taught her that the bravest thing anyone can do is let someone else in. The story of Sarah and Jack had started with a storm and a stranger at the door. It continued with danger and fear and the kind of courage that came from refusing to be a victim. And it ended, or rather transformed into something new, with love and partnership and the simple, profound joy of finding home in another person. Sometimes the hands that reach for you in the dark are the ones meant to hold you in the light. And Sarah Mitchell, once broken but now whole, had finally found hers.